You know, I've never actually seen one before, Mark said, his voice filled with wonder. Marla nodded, her eyes gleaming with excitement. They're rare, especially in these parts, but I've heard the stories. The two friends stood in the shadow of an ancient oak, its branches stretching out like a protective armor against the world beyond. The forest around them was silent, as if holding its breath in anticipation of the momentous event they were about to witness. Mark squinted through the binoculars, his heart racing with every rustle of leaves. Marla leaned over his shoulder, her breath warm against his ear. There, she whispered, pointing to a clearing bathed in the soft glow of dappled sunlight. Mark's gaze followed the direction of her finger, and he adjusted the focus. His breath caught as the creature emerged from the underbrush, its fur shimmering like a jewel in the forest's emerald embrace. It was a young albino deer, its eyes a piercing shade of blue that seemed almost human. It moved with a grace that seemed otherworldly, each step a silent dance on the forest floor. The deer paused, raising its delicate head to sniff the air. Its antlers were just beginning to sprout, a sign that it was still in the early stages of adolescence. Marla's hand found Mark's, and she gave it a gentle squeeze. It's so beautiful, she murmured, her voice filled with awe. The albino deer looked up, the blue eyes seemingly meeting their gaze for a brief moment. Time stood still as the creature took in their presence, and Mark felt as if he could see the cogs of its mind turning, weighing the threat they posed. Then, with a flick of its tail, it continued on its path, unbothered by the intrusion. It watched in hushed reverence as it grazed peacefully, the white fur standing out starkly against the sea of green. Marla pulled out her camera, her hands shaking with excitement. She carefully adjusted the settings, eager to capture the moment in all its glory. The click of the shutter was muffled, almost silent, but to Mark it was as loud as a gunshot in the serene quiet of the woods. He held his breath, waiting for the deer to bolt, but it remained unfazed. As they continued to watch, a sudden movement from the underbrush caught their attention. A second albino deer emerged, this one slightly larger and more confident in its stride. It approached the first, and they realized it was the young deer's mother. The mother deer nudged its offspring gently, and the two began to interact, their movements filled with a tender grace that was mesmerizing to behold. Mark felt his heart swell with the beauty of the scene. He knew they were witnessing something special, something that few humans ever got to see. The bond between the mother and child was palpable, a silent conversation that seemed to transcend the language barrier between species. He could almost hear the whispers of love and protection as the mother licked her child's fur and the young deer nuzzled against her. The mother's eyes flicked up, catching sight of them once again. Her ears perked up in alertness, but she did not flee. Instead, she took a cautious step forward, watching them with a curiosity that mirrored their own. Marla held her breath, her camera hovering in the air, unsure if she should snap another photo. The tension grew thick, like the humidity in the air before a storm. The mother deer took another step, and then another, her nose twitching as she tried to discern their scent. Mark felt the grip on his hand tighten, but he didn't dare move a muscle. His heart pounded in his chest, the thumping echoing in his ears. He didn't want to spook her, didn't want this moment to end. As the mother drew closer, the young albino deer looked up from its grazing, curiosity sparkling in its eyes. It took a tentative step toward them, its spindly legs wobbling slightly. Marla's grip on Mark's hand grew slack, and he could feel the tremble of excitement running through her body. The deer paused, tilting its head to the side, as if questioning their presence. Then, with a sudden burst of courage, it took a few more steps, closing the gap between them. The deer's breath was warm and sweet, carrying the scent of fresh grass and wildflowers. Mark could see the fine hairs on its muzzle quiver with each breath it took. The mother watched intently, but she didn't intervene, seeming to trust the human's intentions. Marla slowly lowered her camera, her eyes never leaving the creature. She reached out her free hand, and the young deer sniffed at her fingers before gently touching them with its nose. A soft sound, somewhere between a sigh and a whisper, escaped Marla's lips. The moment was so pure, so untouched by the chaos of the world outside this sanctuary, that Mark felt as if they had stumbled into a fairy tale. The mother deer took another step forward, her gaze still wary but no longer threatening. She too sniffed at their hands, then seemed to relax, returning to her grazing. Marla turned to Mark, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. This is incredible," she whispered. He nodded, unable to find the words to express his own feelings. They remained there, frozen in time, as the albino deer continued their dance through the clearing. The sun painted the scene in a golden light that seemed to bless their encounter, making it feel as if they had been granted a rare glimpse into a secret corner of the forest. The young deer grew bolder, coming closer to nuzzle against their legs, seeking affection. They stroked its fur, feeling the softness of it beneath their fingertips. It was unlike anything they had ever felt before, a sensation that seemed to resonate deep within their souls. The mother watched, her eyes never leaving them, but she allowed the contact, perhaps understanding that they meant no harm. As the light began to fade, the mother deer gave a soft call, and the young one retreated to her side. The moment had passed, and it was time for them to continue on their journey. Marla and Mark shared a look of profound connection, the memory of the albino deer etched into their minds forever. They knew they would never forget this encounter, this brief intersection of their lives with the mystical creatures of the woods. With a final look back, the deer disappeared into the foliage, leaving them standing there, hand in hand, feeling both humble and exhilarated. The forest resumed its hushed whispers, as if the creatures around them were sharing the story of what had just transpired. They knew that the world was a bigger, more magical place than they had ever imagined, and that sometimes the most extraordinary experiences could be found in the quietest, most unexpected of moments. They walked back to their campsite in a daze, the images of the albino deer replaying in their minds. The weight of what they had seen filled their hearts, and they knew that their friendship had grown stronger, forged by the shared experience of a rare and beautiful encounter. That night, as they sat around the campfire, the flames dancing shadows on their faces, they recounted the story over and over again, as if by speaking it aloud, they could make the magic last a little longer. And in the quiet of the night, as they lay in their tent, the distant sound of hooves on leaves was like a lullaby, a reminder that they had been touched by something truly extraordinary. The next morning dawned with a gentle light that seemed to hold a secret, as if the forest was whispering about the visitors it had entertained the day before. They packed up their gear slowly, reluctant to leave the place that had given them such a gift. As they were about to set off on the trail, Marla paused, a strange expression on her face. "What is it?" Mark asked, following her gaze to a spot in the woods where the light was just right, creating a pattern of shadows and illumination that almost looked like. Marla gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. There, not 50 feet away, stood the albino deer, the mother and child, watching them with the same curiosity they had shown the day before. The young deer took a step forward, its eyes fixed on Marla, who felt an inexplicable pull to go to it. With a gentle nod from Mark, she approached the deer, her movements slow and deliberate. The mother watched, alert but not alarmed. As Marla reached the clearing, the young deer stepped closer, allowing her to touch its soft fur again. A silent communication passed between them, a bond of trust that neither could fully understand, but both felt deep within their bones. For what felt like hours, they remained there, humans and deer, bound by an invisible thread of connection. The forest held its breath around them, as if it too were in awe of the moment. And when it was time to go, they backed away slowly, the deer following their retreat with those piercing blue eyes until they were swallowed by the green curtain of leaves and branches. The hike back was filled with a newfound respect for the world around them, every rustle and flutter imbued with the possibility of another secret waiting to be discovered. They spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid to break the spell that had been cast upon them. The experience had changed them, made them realize that there were mysteries in the world that could not be fully understood, only felt and cherished. As they emerged from the woods and the modern world began to encroach upon their tranquility, they promised each other to keep the memory of the albino deer close, a reminder that sometimes the most profound connections could be found in the most unexpected places. They knew they would carry the magic of that moment with them, a beacon of hope and wonder in a world that often felt too mundane. Marla uploaded the photos to her social media, the images capturing the ethereal beauty of the deer, but somehow they fell flat on the digital canvas. The vibrancy and life of the creatures didn't translate through the screen, leaving her feeling both satisfied and a little sad that others couldn't experience what they had. The likes and comments were plentiful, but the real emotion remained locked in her heart and Mark's. Days turned into weeks, and the hustle and bustle of their lives resumed its usual pace. Yet, every time Mark looked out of his office window at the trees swaying in the breeze, he thought of the albino deer. It was as if the encounter had left an imprint on his soul, reminding him of the beauty that existed beyond the confines of his desk. Marla, on the other hand, found herself drawn back to nature, seeking solace in the quietude of the outdoors. She took up photography more seriously, hoping to capture moments like the one they had shared. Her images grew more poignant, each click of the shutter a silent declaration of her love for the wild. One evening, as they sat in their favorite coffee shop, sipping on hot cocoa and reminiscing about their adventure, Mark looked at her with a glint in his eye. "Marla, I have an idea." Her heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "I think we should start a nature club," he said, his voice low but filled with excitement. "We could take others on hikes, show them the beauty we saw, and maybe, just maybe, they'll find their own albino deer moments." Marla's eyes lit up, the warmth of the memory flooding back. "I'd love that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's do it." And so, the seeds of a new chapter in their lives were planted. The Nature's Whispers Club grew from a small gathering of friends to a community of like-minded individuals, all seeking refuge in the embrace of the natural world. Together, they shared stories and discovered new places, each experience adding to the rich tapestry of their lives. Through the club, they met others who had witnessed the albino deer, and they swapped tales with a sense of kinship that only those who had seen the extraordinary could understand. The deer had become a symbol of hope and wonder, a reminder that there was more to the world than the concrete jungles they called home. As they grew older and the club grew in numbers, they watched the young deer in the photos they had taken grow into majestic adults, their fur now a stark contrast to the aging photographs. Yet, the bond they had formed remained as vibrant as the day they had first met. Years later, Mark and Marla stood in the very spot where they had first laid eyes on the albino deer, their hair now flecked with gray. The forest had changed around them, grown older, but the magic remained. They held hands, their eyes shimmering with the light of 1,000 shared memories, as the whispers of the leaves told them that the deer were still out there, watching over them from the shadows, a testament to the enduring power of a single, unforgettable encounter. Their nature club had flourished, bringing together a diverse group of individuals who had all been touched by the beauty of the wild. They had seen the joy and wonder in the eyes of children as they caught their first glimpse of a wild creature, felt the quiet awe of those who had never ventured beyond the city limits. Through every hike, every shared moment of discovery, they had woven a community bound by a love for the untamed world. Their club had inspired others to seek out the rare and the beautiful, to protect the fragile ecosystems that held such secrets. They had raised funds for conservation efforts, spoken at schools, and even managed to convince the local government to declare the area where they had found the albino deer a protected zone. It was a small victory, but one that meant the world to them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in a warm, amber glow, They heard the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats, the gentle patter of deer approaching. The mother and her grown child emerged from the underbrush, their fur now a faded ivory, but their eyes as vibrant as ever. The members of the Nature's Whispers Club held their collective breath as the albino deer approached, their steps deliberate, as if they had an appointment with destiny. The young deer, now an adult, recognized them immediately, its blue gaze locking with Mark's and Marla's. It was a look that spoke of years of friendship, of shared experiences, of a bond that transcended the ordinary. The creature bent its head, and Mark reached out, his hand trembling, to stroke its muzzle. The deer didn't pull away, instead leaning into the touch with a trust that brought tears to their eyes. Marla took out her camera, the same one that had captured that first incredible moment, and snapped a photo. This time, the click was not a disturbance, but a promise. A promise to never forget the magic of the natural world, and to continue sharing it with others. The deer lingered for a while, as if bidding farewell to old friends. And as the last of the light disappeared, leaving the forest bathed in moonlit shadows, they turned and disappeared into the night, leaving behind a trail of whispered stories that would be told around campfires for generations to come. Mark looked at Marla, and she knew what he was thinking. The albino deer had been a catalyst for so much in their lives, a spark that had ignited a passion for the wild and the rare. As they turned to leave the clearing, their hearts filled with a quiet joy. They knew that their adventure was far from over. There were more secrets to uncover, more bonds to form, and more moments of wonder to share with those who sought them. The Nature's Whispers Club had become more than just a hobby. It was a legacy, a beacon of hope in a world that often forgot to look beyond the concrete and the steel. And as they walked back to civilization, hand in hand, the whispers of the forest trailed after them, a gentle reminder that the magic was always there, waiting to be found by those willing to listen. The club had grown in size and influence, but the core remained the same, a group of friends bound by a shared love for the untouched corners of the earth. They had seen marriages, breakups, and new beginnings within their ranks, but the deer remained a constant, a silent sentinel of their shared past. One day, as they were preparing for their annual fundraising gala, Mark received a call from a frantic local ranger. A new development was threatening the protected area where they had encountered the albino deer all those years ago. The ranger had seen the deer, their fur now a ghostly white in the moonlight, as they fled from the roar of bulldozers and the scent of burning trees. With a fiery determination, Mark and Marla rallied their members, channeling the awe and wonder they had felt into a call to action. They organized protests, petitions, and fundraising campaigns, fighting tirelessly against the encroaching destruction. The community responded in kind, their hearts touched by the plight of the deer and the sanctity of their home. The battle was long and arduous, but in the end, they won. The forest remained untouched, a bastion of beauty in a world that so often prioritized progress over preservation. The albino deer became a symbol of resilience and hope, a testament to the power of a small group of individuals to change the world. Through the years, Mark and Marla watched the young deer grow into a proud adult, its antlers a crown of victory over the forces that had threatened its home. And every time they returned to the clearing, the deer would emerge, a silent greeting from a creature that had become a part of their very essence. The club had evolved into a movement, a force for change that had touched the lives of countless people. And as they grew older, passing the torch to the next generation, they knew that the whispers of the forest would live on, a reminder to always cherish the rare and extraordinary.